The grand chandelier overhead cast a golden glow over the luxurious restaurant, where the air was filled with the soft clinking of glasses, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from well-dressed guests. The atmosphere exuded elegance, from the polished marble floors to the delicate floral arrangements on each table. It was an evening of celebration, a gathering of the elite, where every attendee played a part in the spectacle of wealth and refinement. Stepping through the entrance, I felt a surge of anticipation. Tonight was supposed to be special, an event that everyone in the family was invited to. I had dressed the part, sleek, confident, prepared to blend in seamlessly with the prestigious crowd. But just as I took a step further inside, a sharp, condescending voice sliced through the air, halting me in my tracks. "Oh, you're here?" The words dripped with fake surprise, carrying an unmistakable edge of mockery. I turned to see my stepmother, elegantly dressed in a designer gown, her lips curled in amusement. Her eyes flicked over me with barely disguised disdain before she dramatically glanced down at a list in her perfectly manicured hand. "Strange. I don't see your name anywhere." A murmur rippled through the nearby guests, their curiosity piqued. I felt their eyes on me, assessing, judging, waiting for my reaction. My stepmother reveled in moments like these, where she could exert control, make me feel small, remind me that in her world, I was always the outsider. Then came the final blow, delivered with a honeyed tone but designed to cut deep. "Would you like to look for a space in the dining room?" She exaggerated her words just enough to ensure that others nearby could hear. A few chuckles echoed softly from a group standing nearby, their amusement evident at my apparent humiliation. For a brief moment, I remained still. The old me might have lowered my gaze, swallowed the shame, and retreated. But that person no longer existed. Slowly, I allowed a small smile to spread across my face, calm, composed, and entirely unbothered. I met her gaze, watching as the amusement in her eyes flickered uncertainly. Then, in a steady voice, I replied, "Would you like to check with the owner first?" Silence. The whispers halted, the smirks wavered, and in that instant, something shifted. She had expected submission, but what she received instead was the beginning of her downfall. A flicker of uncertainty crossed my stepmother's face, but she was too skilled at manipulation to let it linger. Her lips pursed, and then, just as quickly, she let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head in amusement as if I had just told a ridiculous joke. "Oh," she said, tilting her head slightly, her voice dripping with condescension. "And now you're claiming that the owner is on your side?" Her words were meant to dismiss me, to regain the upper hand, but I could already sense the shift in the room. The guests, who had initially been entertained by my supposed embarrassment, were now intrigued. Their whispers grew quieter, their gazes more focused. Something was unfolding before them, and they didn't want to miss it. I remained silent, simply watching her, letting the weight of my words settle in. That silence, it was something she had never encountered from me before. She was used to my compliance, my quiet retreat whenever she decided to put me in my place. But tonight was different. A flood of memories rushed through my mind, bringing with them the simmering resentment of years spent in her shadow. She had never accepted me, never treated me as family. From the moment she had married my father, she had made it clear that I was an inconvenience, a reminder of the past she wanted to erase. I had grown up watching her shower affection on others, playing the perfect hostess, the perfect stepmother, just never to me. Whenever there was an event, she ensured I was excluded or treated like an afterthought. If gifts were given, mine were always less significant. If support was needed, I was left to fend for myself while she lavished attention on those she deemed worthy. It wasn't just emotional manipulation, she had worked hard to keep me financially dependent too. Any opportunity one had, she sabotaged in subtle ways, discouraging my ambitions, ensuring I felt inadequate, making sure I knew my place. And now, standing here in this luxurious restaurant, she was attempting the same strategy, public humiliation, making me feel like an outsider. This dinner, this guest list, this entire evening had been orchestrated for one purpose, to remind me that I was insignificant. But what she didn't realize was that her carefully laid plan was about to collapse. I caught the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass, the way she shifted ever so slightly as if bracing for my response. She was waiting for me to crumble, to shrink under the weight of her carefully constructed world. Instead, I smiled again, calm, collected, and completely unfazed. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything began to change. The tension in the air thickened as my stepmother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw the confusion in her eyes. She had expected me to break, to bow my head and accept her humiliation like I always had. But this time, I stood firm. This time, I wasn't going to be the outsider she had tried so hard to make me believe I was. A part of me wanted to relish the moment, but another part couldn't ignore the sting of the past, the years of neglect, of being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. I remembered being a child, watching from the corner of the living room as she threw birthday parties for her friends and their children. Laughter, music, beautifully wrapped gifts, everything a celebration should be. But I was never part of it. If I tried to join, she would simply look at me with a polite but firm smile and say, "This isn't for you, dear. Maybe next time." Next time never came. Even when my father was around, she found ways to make me invisible. If she planned a family vacation, she conveniently forgot to book a ticket for me. If guests came over, she made sure I was either running errands or sitting quietly in the background, unnoticed. She never raised her voice, never directly told me I didn't belong. Instead, she did something worse, she made me feel like I didn't exist at all. And yet, I had fought. I had fought for my place, for recognition, for even the smallest sliver of respect. I worked harder, pushed myself beyond limits, built something of my own. But no matter how much I achieved, she always found a way to undermine it. This night was supposed to be just another chapter in the same story, her moment of triumph, my moment of disgrace. But she had underestimated me. Around us, the guests were beginning to take sides. Some exchanged amused glances, clearly enjoying the drama. A few of my stepmother's closest friends smirked, silently cheering for her as she tried to regain control. Others, however, were growing uneasy. They had never seen me like this before, calm, self-assured, completely unbothered by her attempts to belittle me. And then, in the midst of it all, came the moment that would change everything. A hushed murmur spread through the crowd, whispers traveling like wildfire. Someone had just received a message, a piece of information that left them stunned. A few guests exchanged looks of disbelief. My stepmother, still trying to maintain her composure, noticed the shift but didn't understand it yet. She didn't know that her carefully constructed illusion was about to shatter. She didn't know that her past actions, her secrets, and her real place in this world were all about to be exposed. And this time, I would be the one standing in the spotlight. The smugness on my stepmother's face was unmistakable. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, as if she had already won. "Fine," she scoffed, her voice laced with amusement. "If you're so confident, go ahead. Call the owner." Laughter rippled through her group of friends. They exchanged knowing glances, expecting to watch me fumble, to see my confidence shatter when my bluff was exposed. I smiled. A waiter, who had been watching the exchange nervously, hurried away. Within moments, the murmurs in the restaurant grew louder. The guests who had been observing the drama unfold straightened in their seats as a tall, sharply dressed man entered. The room seemed to shift. There was something about his presence, the authority in his stride, the way the staff immediately straightened at the sight of him. The owner had arrived. But the moment that truly set everything into motion was when his eyes met mine. The amusement on my stepmother's face evaporated as she watched him walk straight toward me. The respectful nod he gave me sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. "Sir," he greeted, his voice carrying a weight that made the entire room pause. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." A sharp inhale from my stepmother. Her face turned ghostly pale. I turned to her, keeping my expression unreadable, though inside, I was savoring every second of this. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," I said casually, my voice carrying just loud enough for everyone to hear. I glanced around the room, watching as realization dawned on every guest. Some already had their hands covering their mouths in shock. Apparently, my stepmother forgot who owns this place. The silence that followed was deafening. My stepmother's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked from me to the owner, then back to me, as if searching for some indication that this was a joke. But the horror in her eyes only grew as she saw the unwavering confirmation on my face. "You," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her friends, the ones who had been laughing just moments ago, were frozen, their faces a mix of disbelief and discomfort. Some subtly edged away from her, no longer wanting to be associated with what was unfolding. The owner, still maintaining his professional demeanor, turned his attention to my stepmother. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" She swallowed hard, suddenly aware of all the eyes on her. I didn't know," she muttered, her voice shaking slightly. "That much is obvious," I said smoothly, tilting my head. You've spent years making sure I felt like an outsider. It's quite amusing, actually, that you assumed I still was. The weight of my words settled over her like a crushing force. Her knees wobbled slightly. The realization had fully set in. This wasn't just an embarrassment. This was her downfall. The restaurant had gone eerily silent. Every eye was now on my stepmother, who stood frozen, her face drained of all color. The whispers had grown into a low murmur, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Some guests exchanged amused glances, while others shook their heads, clearly enjoying the turn of events. The staff had subtly shifted their stance. No longer treating my stepmother as an elite guest, their eyes held a newfound awareness, one that recognized who truly held the power in this establishment. I took a slow step forward, letting the weight of the moment settle in. Then, in a voice steady and laced with authority, I delivered the final blow. Since you seem unaware of the guest list, I said, tilting my head slightly, perhaps it's you who doesn't belong here. My stepmother flinched. A collective gasp rippled through the room. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, I turned slightly, making a subtle motion with my hand. Instantly, 2 uniformed security guards stepped forward. Escort her out, I instructed, my tone calm, effortless, and absolute. The shift in energy was palpable. The once confident woman, who had relished humiliating me just moments ago, now stood paralyzed with shock. Her lips quivered. This is a misunderstanding, she blurted, her voice desperate, eyes darting between me and the guests. But the damage was already done. The same people who had laughed at her taunts earlier were now watching with smirks, their amusement barely concealed. Others whispered behind their hands, shaking their heads at the sheer irony of it all. One of the guards stepped forward. "Ma'am, please come with us." My stepmother turned frantically, looking for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one moved. No one came to her rescue. The power dynamic had shifted completely. She tried again, her voice now tinged with panic. "Wait. I didn't know. This isn't fair. You can't do this." I simply raised an eyebrow. "Oh. You didn't think it was unfair when you tried to humiliate me in front of everyone?" She stammered, but no coherent words came out. One of the guards gently placed a hand on her arm, urging her to move. Realizing she had no way out, she let out a strangled breath. Her face burned with humiliation as she stumbled slightly, allowing herself to be led away. As she passed by the tables, the final nail in the coffin came, muffled chuckles, whispers, and the cold, judgmental stares of the guests she once sought validation from. By the time the doors closed behind her, the room burst into hushed laughter and satisfied murmurs. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, then turned back to the staff. "Now," I said smoothly, slipping my hands into my pockets, "let's continue the evening, shall we?" And just like that, the balance had been restored. As the security guards escorted my stepmother out, I stood there for a moment, watching her retreating figure with an almost palpable sense of satisfaction. The guests, once silent and awkward, had now shifted their attention to me, their gazes filled with a mixture of awe, respect, and curiosity. The weight of the moment settled into the room like a thick fog, but I felt nothing but clarity. I walked back toward the most luxurious VIP table in the restaurant, the same one my stepmother had thought I didn't belong at. As I settled into the plush chair, the staff swiftly resumed their duties. The tension that had gripped the atmosphere now seemed to dissipate, replaced by a buzz of admiration for the unexpected twist that had just unfolded. Drinks were served promptly, the finest champagne poured into crystal flutes, each one glistening as it caught the light from the grand chandeliers above. The clink of glasses was sharp and deliberate, echoing through the room. I raised my glass high, the golden liquid catching the light. "To recognizing who truly belongs," I said, my voice carrying through the room, calm yet filled with an undeniable strength. The guests looked at each other, unsure at first, before the realization set in. They knew I had reclaimed my rightful place. The toast was met with a few hesitant but approving claps, then the murmurs of agreement grew louder. It wasn't just about the table. It was about reclaiming the respect that had been denied for so long. The power had shifted, and they all knew it. As I took a sip from my glass, I couldn't help but smile to myself. "Some people forget their place," I said quietly, a slight smirk curling my lips. Good thing I never did. The room fell into an odd silence for just a moment, and then, the applause started. Soft at first, then building into a genuine wave of appreciation. The guests, those who had once looked down on me or ignored me, were now acknowledging my presence with respect. Some clapped, while others simply nodded in approval. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the evening's victory settling in. My stepmother had underestimated me, but now, in front of everyone, I had shown her, and everyone else, exactly where I belonged.